So why don't satyrs find Roman demigods on their patrols across the country? We know that Roman and Greek demigods have been living alongside one another for years, but isn't it strange that a satyr has never seemingly accidentally brought a Roman demigod to Camp Half-Blood? Well, we think we know why, and we actually believe that they have. Stick around, because in the second half of the video, we're going to talk about the other side and discuss Greek demigods making their way to Camp Jupiter. More on that in just a minute. It's important for us to remember how drastically Camp Half-Blood has changed over the years, and it was just a few short summers ago that the gods basically didn't recognize their kids. In The Dark Prophecy, Apollo questions whether or not Georgina was one of his children, and he says that the gods simply lose track of the children that they have with mortals, so not all kids get claimed. And this is a problem that goes back years. In Cabin 11, there's an entire roster of demigods who go their entire lives without ever being claimed by a godly parent, and the best they can do is make an educated guess based on their skill sets and personalities. Until they are claimed, however, they are placed in the Hermes cabin, stuffing the cabin full not just of children of Hermes, but children of minor gods and unclaimed campers. So if Roman demigods were ever found by satyrs, then it would make sense that they simply went unclaimed and unrecognized. It's entirely possible that Roman demigods have made their way to Camp Half-Blood, but no one knew it because they were never officially claimed. And they were never officially claimed because their parents quite literally did not know that they existed. This might be a problem that goes deeper than just forgetting how many kids a particular god had, and it might actually be a situation where the Roman form of the god isn't even watching Camp Half-Blood at all. We know that the difference between Greek and Roman gods goes deeper than just the name change, and that the personalities of some gods were drastically affected by the transfer of power between Greece and Rome, and this has impacted their memory. Athena in particular was one of the heaviest to be hit, but we get to see the differences between Ares and Mars and the son of Neptune, which clearly illustrates that a god's memory is affected. Mars does not recognize Percy, and does not acknowledge their history, which is much different than simply forgetting how many children a god may or may not have. Percy was the first mortal to draw blood against Ares in eons, and to this day, he is the only one that we officially know of. Ares remembered him in the Titan's Curse when he caused his sword to fail, and he remembered him in The Last Olympian when he reveled in the idea of getting to pummel Percy for an eternity without ever allowing Percy to die. Percy is not a forgettable demigod, to say the least. Yet just a few months after the Battle of New York, Mars shows no recollection of Percy despite being the same individual. We also see just how differently his personality is, as he is much more controlled, tactical-minded, and strategic, whereas Ares is a blunt instrument. So if a Roman god sired a half-blood, and then that half-blood was to get caught up in the wrong camp, then they would almost certainly never be claimed by their godly parent, and there wouldn't be an easy way to recognize that they were Roman. In The Lost Hero, the only reason why Chiron knew something was wrong with Jason was because he had a lance made of imperial gold, not celestial bronze. Without that key detail, there's no real way that Chiron could have ever recognized that Jason wasn't a son of Zeus, and rather that he was a child of Jupiter. Across the Heroes of Olympus series, we see that demigods of the Greek and Roman pantheons are remarkably similar, and share a lot of overlapping traits. In the Trials of Apollo, Meg is claimed by Demeter, despite the fact that she had a set of imperial gold sickles, and is even suggested that she might be a child of Ceres rather than Demeter, but Apollo is adamant that that's not the case. He's the only one who knows because he used to be a god, but no one else can tell if Meg is a Greek or a Roman demigod. Talia and Jason have nearly identical skill sets, even though Talia has said she never tried controlling winds to make herself fly, but it's not an exact science. For instance, Hazel has a particular affinity for gemstones buried beneath the earth, and that's because in Roman mythology, Pluto is also presided over underground riches, including precious metals and stones. Nico has never displayed this power, but remember, not only is Hazel a child of the Big Three, but this skill is unique to her even among them, which is why she was meant to be one of the seven. It's the same for Frank's shapeshifting, or Leo's firebending, which not all children of Mars or Hephaestus have. Regardless, this is all to say that Roman and Greek demigods are nearly indistinguishable when it comes to the less niche cases where demigods don't have physical powers. If it weren't for the shapeshifting, Frank could easily pass as a son of Ares, and join the Ares cabin just as Leo would still be building his machines regardless of whether or not his father was Vulcan or Hephaestus. Children of Venus, Mars, Mercury, or Vulcan might have blended into camp without anyone ever knowing. But what if we looked at it the other way around? Why haven't any Greek demigods made their way to Camp Jupiter before Percy? The answer to this comes with how Camp Jupiter's recruitment structure is built, because they do not handle recruitment the same way as the Greeks. They don't send fawns to schools to locate demigods, and fawns on the Roman side actually have a bit of a reputation for being freeloading, non-productive beggars. In Camp Jupiter Classified, we get to see what the Roman recruitment process looks like thanks to Claudia, child of Cardaea, and legacy of Mercury. She says that after her father revealed himself to be the grandson of Mercury, she didn't go straight to camp, but instead she went to the Wolf House to train with Lupa before making her way to camp. And this is common practice. Jason went through the very same thing when he was just 2, and even Percy trained with Lupa before he was allowed to go to camp, even though he was a well-trained Greek demigod. This means that first, a demigod has to pass the trials of the Wolf House, but it's also important to remember that the Romans don't give nearly as much attention to the parentage of different demigods. At Camp Jupiter, campers are not divided by godly parent, but instead they are placed into cohorts alongside other demigods with mixed ancestry. They even take in legacy campers who are grandchildren or great-grandchildren of a god, such as Octavian or again, Claudia. The Romans simply don't care who your godly parent is, even though technically unclaimed demigods are meant to go in probatio, but this rule seems to be kind of loose. Once an unclaimed demigod achieves a feat of remarkable strength or skill, they're allowed to join the mainline ranks, but Hazel was still on probatio even after being claimed by Pluto, so the rule isn't enforced by the letter of the law. Even though demigods can get claimed, which we see with Frank, it's likely that unclaimed Roman demigods aren't nearly as much of a taboo as it is on the Greek side once they pass the trials of probatio. If a Roman demigod is unclaimed, they will still be assigned a cohort, trained as a soldier, and taught how to show their mettle through trial by combat rather by simply being assigned to a cabin or a team based on their bloodline. To put it simply, the Romans do not care who your parent is. They only care what you can do and where you fit into the Roman legion. So if a Greek demigod ever made their way to the Roman camp, then they're probably also completely camouflaged into one of the cohorts without ever giving it a second thought. If Satyrs are truly patrolling the entire country, which we know they are, then it makes sense that they would have come across a Roman demigod at some point in their travels. Coach Hedge found the Lost Hero trio at the Grand Canyon, and Clarice is said to be from Arizona, indicating that Satyrs are spread as far west as at least Arizona. So now, what happens that Percy has made the gods promise to claim all of their children? This is the piece that we know the least about, and is the most difficult to fill in, but let's try our best and see what we can come up with. We know that both Piper and Leo were both over the age of 13 when Percy made the gods swear on the sticks to claim their children, and they got claimed in the Lost Hero more than 4 months after the events of Lost Olympia. We also know that they didn't keep their promise to free Calypso, and that Leo had to jailbreak her at the end of Blood of Olympus. And since Zeus was the one to make Styx the goddess of oaths, it makes sense that he might be able to get off easy for forgetting his promises to her. We know that children are being claimed much more often, but we don't get any firm confirmation that every single child has been claimed since the promises were made. So it's possible that some are still flying under the radar. But even if they're not, the Greeks and Romans are united not just in terms of the two camps, but the gods themselves. Their personality problems were solved when Gaia was defeated, and they no longer have to keep themselves separate. So it's possible that if a child of Mars gets to Camp Half-Blood, that they've either got to turn around and get sent back to Camp Jupiter, or Ares claims this hypothetical child and all as well. We're more inclined to believe that if a Roman demigod is discovered, or vice versa, that the camps simply orchestrate an exchange program to get them where they belong, since we know that there are differences between the Roman and Greek gods. A son of Mars is a son of Mars, not a son of Ares. So this is our own personal theory. But let us know what you think. Do you think this is what is going on, or is there something that we're missing? As always, we love this series, we love talking about it, we would love to hear from you, so go ahead and jump in the conversation. Let us know what you want to see next, and as always, have a great one.